Right.
Well, what do you know? I just got delivered a game about delivering stuff. Hello and welcome back. Today's subject is probably the most divisive game I've ever reviewed. Death Stranding. A bizarre game made by the equally bizarre Hideo Kojima that he has been working on ever since he left Konami. So let's dive into the bizarre tale of Norman Reedus and his funky feeders and see the end result of Kojima Unchained.
Buried underground, but I'll keep coming.
The story takes place at an unspecified time in the future, where humanity is faced with the threat of a strange rain called timefall that rapidly ages anything it touches, with the dead turning into ghost-like entities called BTs. I would make a British Telecom joke, but I already did that in my Titanfall 2 review. Besides, here BT just stands for beach things. And if the BTs get a hold of the living, the resulting combination of matter and antimatter causes a massive explosion, creating a large crater in the ground. And all of this is happening because of an event called the Death Stranding. You play as Norman Reedus playing Sam Porter Bridges, a solitary delivery guy who lost his wife and has a peculiar power to come back from the dead, and also has a phobia of being touched. He bumps into a woman called Fragile. Get it? And after they have a close encounter with a BT, Sam heads off to join up with a group called Bridges, who are helping to reconnect America under the orders of the UCA, the United Cities of America. Sam tries to help them transport a dead body to a crematorium before it turns into a BT, only for them to get caught in timefall and ganged up on by an unknown amount of BTs. One of the Bridges employees gives Sam a baby in a jar before the whole area is turned into a massive crater. Sam wakes up at Capital Knot City under the care of a bloke with Guillermo del Toro's face called Deadman. He explains that the baby in the jar you were given is called a bridge baby, or BB for short, a creature connected to both the lands of the dead and the living, and can be used as a sort of radar to detect BTs. It is also revealed that Sam is the son of President Strand, who is currently dying of cancer. Sam enters the president's office, where he meets his now bedridden mother, along with her aide, Die Hard Man. sorry. Her aide, Die Hard Man. Sorry, just fucking Die Hard Man. Good grief. And then President Strand dies. Luckily, they have another candidate lined up, Sam's older sister, Emily. Unfortunately, she's at the other end of the country and currently being held hostage by a bunch of terrorists. Sam is begrudgingly given a task by Commit Not Alive with Difficulty bloke to reconnect all the cities to the chiral network, travel across the country, save his sister and make America whole again.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
But first things first, Sam has to head up a hill to cremate his dead mum. Along his travels from there and back, he discovers that his blood actually hurts BTs. He then heads off to Port Knot City, and along the way he mentions to Deadman that every time he plugs into his BB, he gets weird visions involving Mads Mikkelsen. Deadman tells Sam not to worry about it and it's probably just the memories of the BB. He finally arrives at Port Knot City, where he's confronted by a bloke named Higgs, who is the leader of the terrorists and has the ability to summon BTs. After defeating said BT, you meet up with Fragile again, who lends you her boat to get to Lake Knot City. After helping out a few locals and hooking them up to the chiral network, You find out that Higgs and Fragile used to work together, but one day Higgs went rogue and blew up a city with a nuclear bomb, and Fragile got partially blamed. Sam then heads off to deliver a bunch of packages to South Knot City. Along the way he meets up with Fragile, who reveals that Higgs has snuck a bomb into your shipment. She reveals that Higgs pulled the same trick with her to blow up Central Knot City, and afterwards he captured her and forced her to dispose of another bomb while walking almost naked through Timefall, leaving her body old and crippled, but kept her face intact so that everyone would still recognise her. Sam manages to dispose of this nuclear bomb by chucking it in a tar pit. Sam finally arrives at South Knot City, only to be swept up by a tornado. He then wakes up upon a ghostly battlefield, filled with the spirits of dead soldiers that died in World War I, and escapes by fighting Mads Mikkelsen in military gear. Sam arrives back at South Knot City and finds out that he's only been gone a second since he got abducted. He then meets up with a woman called Mama, who is connected to the spirit of her unborn child. The two then discuss just what the hell happened with the tornado and the time lapse between what Sam saw and how much time actually passed. Sam's next mission is to link up Mount Knot City. However, the woman in charge of there does not want to be part of Bridges or the chiral network. However, you discover that she's Mama's twin sister, so you head back down to Mama and help her sever her connection to her unborn child. But just as you're about to leave, Higgs shows up and then sends a couple of BTs after you. Sam manages to escape the BTs and arrive at Mount Knot City, only for Mama to unfortunately die. As it turns out, the spirit of her unborn child was what was keeping her alive this whole time. However, her body doesn't deteriorate and turn into a BT because her spirit is connected to her sisters and she can now somehow possess and speak through her sister. Then the man then shows up and explains to Sam that he is an artificial human created from the dead body parts of others, and that he has come to reset your BB while you deliver some packages to some of the local residents. You finish those deliveries and head off to meet up with Dead Man, only for the two of you to be swept up in another tornado and transported this time to a spooky ghostly battlefield from World War II this time. You defeat Mads Mikkelsen again and escape back to Mount Knot City. You and Dead Man then discover that Mads Mikkelsen's character's name is Clifford Unger, a soldier who has been dead for a number of years. Your next task is to deliver Mama's body to a person named Hartman, an expert in all things BT related, and has the special quirk of living for 21 minutes at a time before dying for 3 minutes, then coming back to life in an endless cycle. Hartman informs you that when people die, they go to their own personal afterlife called a beach. However, those with similar experiences can have their beaches tangled together. Hence the World War I and World War II beaches you ended up in. Hartman has spent his many 3 minutes of death travelling between beaches looking for the spirits of his dead wife and daughter. He also reveals that events like the Death Stranding have happened in Earth's past, all preceding an extinction event caused by an extinction entity. And also the chiral network is connected to the beaches in an attempt to retrieve lost information.
Everybody got that?
Sam heads across the tar belt to the last of the Knot cities in an attempt to rescue Amelie, only for it to turn out that Amelie is under the control of Higgs, and the two of them merge to form the extinction entity. A giant gelatinous humanoid BT with no hands and a head made out of fingers. Ugh. You fight the entity in a boss fight, only for Higgs to escape with Amelie to her beach. You then meet up with Fragile, who helps transport Sam to his sister's beach as well. Sam then has a climactic battle with Higgs. He rescues Amelie and the two run off along the beach. You may think that things are starting to wrap up, only for the two of them to bump into Die Hardman, who's holding a gun to a younger President Strand's head. Then all of a sudden, Clifford shows up and abducts Die Hardman. And then Amelie pushes Sam into the water and he wakes up at South Knot City. He is informed that there is a giant timefall storm heading across the entire country and that he needs to head back to Capital Knot City as soon as possible. He almost arrives at Lake Knot City, only to be swept up by another tornado to have another fight with Clifford, this time in the Vietnam War. You beat Clifford for a final time and he decides to let go of his pain at last and pass on. Sam then wakes up at Port Knot City and continues on his way to Capital Knot City while carrying supplies to help Fragile recover so she can teleport you to Amelie's beach. Along the way you have a brief diversion fighting a BT that takes the form of a giant flying whale, and you finally arrive at Capital Knot City, deliver the supplies to Fragile, and she teleports you to Amelie's beach at last. Sam and Amelie have a conversation in front of a very familiar looking backdrop, and Amelie reveals that she's the extinction entity. The reason these extinctions keep happening is because the world wants to return back to nothingness, and the purpose of extinction entities is to do just that. Yet all their attempts have failed because some life seems to manage to survive, and as the latest extinction entity, it is Amelie's job to try and finish the job. So she teamed up with Higgs and she plans to use the chiral network to essentially erase all life. The only way to prevent this from happening is to sever this beach's connection to all the other beaches. Sam manages to do this, although I'm not quite sure how, only to end up stranded on his own beach. He wanders around for a while the credits play and his face turns slowly blue, and receives visions revealing that Amelie never truly existed, but rather she was just a part of President Strand's soul that splintered off, that President Strand was the one responsible for the Death Stranding, that Sam died as an infant, brought back to life by Amelie, and adopted by President Strand, and is finally rescued by Deadman. The game then jumps to 2 weeks later, where Die Hardman is being inaugurated as the new president, and after the inauguration, it reveals to Sam that he was the one that killed Clifford. Sam is then set free from Bridges and is given one final task: to cremate his now dead BB. But before he does that, he decides to plug into it one more time, revealing that the visions he thought were the BBs were actually his, that he was a BB who was let out of his pod and brought back to life by Amelie, that Clifford is his actual father, and that President Strand was the one who actually shot Clifford. Sam lets his BB out of its pod and it springs back to life. He then heads off with his new daughter, and the end. Or is it? No, but seriously, it's the end. We can move on to the next section now. The best way I can describe this game is a third-person delivery simulator. Travelling from place to place and having to contend with bandits, BTs, and your most dangerous opponent of all, the terrain itself. You can help yourself out with equipment such as ladders and ropes to get up and down places, constructible buildings like bridges, scanning devices and charging stations, and a bunch of other things, blood bags to extend your health, and of course a repair spray to help repair your damaged packages. Some have some weapons available as well, such as a bolt gun to tie up enemies, a sticky gun to grab objects from afar, as well as some more normal weapons like grenades, handguns, shotguns, assault rifles, grenade launchers and rocket launchers, all with lethal, non-lethal and hermetic rounds. But be careful of the hermetic rounds, as they do use Sam's blood as a resource, so better pack some extra blood bags just for good measure. And speaking of body fluids, you also have the ability to scare away BTs by throwing containers of either Sam's used shower water, feces or urine at them. Or alternatively, you can throw these containers at the bandits and pretend you're the sniper from Team Fortress 2.
Balls away!
One of the keys to playing this game is proper preparation. Packing in the right equipment depending on where you're going, balancing out both your equipments and your deliveries, and making sure that Sam isn't over encumbered. Later on, Sam gets access to some vehicles, although there are some areas that you'll find it very hard for those vehicles to access. Let's just say if I had £1 for every time I got one of my vehicles stuck in this game, well, let's just say I'll be able to go on a decent shopping spree. The graphics are pretty awe-inspiring. The people look very realistic, and the amount of time and detail that are put into the environments creates an extremely immersive world. The music is appropriately atmospheric and haunting most of the time. However, there is sometimes a dissonance between the music is playing and what is actually going on at the time. For example, a slow vocal track continuing to play even after you've just bumped into a bunch of BTs.
Here it goes, dirty eyes, sweaty clothes.
This game suffers from what I like to call the Marmite effect. While the story and lore is really good, if a bit bizarre and confusing, although given who made this it's kind of not surprising. The actors do a really good job. The music is appropriate most of the time and the graphics are really impressive. However, it's the core gameplay, essentially being a glorified fetch quests, that is where people that aren't exactly fond of that sort of gameplay may despise this game. While I personally enjoyed it, I can definitely see that it's not for everyone. Well, that's all from me. Signing off. Quickly! You've got to come and see this! This might be interesting. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Death Stranding. Na 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 na. It's the Kojima game in your neighborhood. Guess you're gonna play Death Stranding. Some people think it's crap, others think it's good. What you gonna play? Death Stranding. Na 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 na. Rudy's afraid of no ghosts. Na 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 na. Yeah 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 yeah. Hello and welcome back. Playing Sam Porter Fishes. Fishes?
Fishes?
An isolated living and fought her to dispose of another bong.
Did you say bong?
The characters look extremely realistic.